All right, we got a great show coming up for you today. Off of a disappointing loss to the Phoenix Suns over the weekend, we dive in on what the Brooklyn Nets are in the pool of contending championship caliber teams, maybe a little bit further down the pecking order than we anticipate. We get inside James Harden's game, the state of it, and why there's a struggle there to adapt in this year's Brooklyn Nets roster, and then the bigs, the rotations, and the things that the Brooklyn Nets still need to figure out, Doug, quarter of the way through the season. Questions getting answered and other questions being uncovered.
Yeah, we're going to talk about, are they a contender? It's early. It's never too early to start asking this question. I think there's definite signs that there's things that need to be solved. This last game against Phoenix was a pretty good window into that. We're going to cover it all, but first, the theme music.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Brooklyn, yo.
All right, welcome back to the Locked On Nets podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I am at Adam Armbrecht covering the victorious New York Football Giants over on the One Giant podcast over there, blue check mark certified fresh, at Doug Norrie on Twitter, also owner-operator DFSR for all your daily fantasy needs. DraftKings, FanDuel, you got daily fantasy. Doug has you covered. On a Monday, good sir, after the Brooklyn Nets fall over the weekend, Saturday night, we remind you, of course, that this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, which you can check out over prizepicks.com. Use promo code NBA or go to your app store and download the app today. Prize Picks is your daily fantasy made easy. As I say, the Brooklyn Nets fall over the weekend, 113-107 to the Phoenix Suns in a game that feels representative of more than just one game where they lose. This is now maybe a trend when it comes to the level of competition that the Brooklyn Nets are going up against. Before we dive into that, Harden's play and what a triple-double can mean or not mean in a game and some rotation stuff, where's the general sense of Doug coming off of the holiday weekend, the whole hullabaloo?
Yeah, so it was not a great game for the Nets on Sunday. Or, I mean, Saturday night. It didn't ruin my holiday or anything. So I think that's I think we can. I know everyone was sitting on the edge of their seat waiting to know like if that was like what ultimately affected the overall weekend. Good news, everybody. It didn't.
You're on the watch. Like people have Doug Norrie's name on the watch list.
No, but I think we'll get into some of the stats and some of these other just sort of tidbits of like record stuff. I don't think that this has, if this game, okay, let me put it this way. If this game happened at game 70, right? Like, I think I'd have a very different feeling about it. I'm not going to hit the panic button right now because of a loss. I think that there are definite flaws here. We're going to get into a lot of them in this episode. The Nets are 14-6. They lost to a really pretty good and put together Suns team. So am I worried? No, but I thought that this loss, as opposed to a few other ones, was actually pretty instructive about what some of the problems are for the team, right? And so I guess, and that's probably what we're just going to get into today.
Yeah, and it feels a little up and down, right? Because you have that Boston game where we felt like the Nets had figured out another piece to this puzzle for themselves this year, and now maybe we're back into this weird ground of saying, what's the next thing that they need to adjust? What's the next problem that they need to solve? And that's going to be a big part of this season, but you mentioned being 14-6, so we're at the quarter mark effectively of the season. The Brooklyn Nets are 7-0 against teams below 500 and 7-6 now after that loss to Phoenix against teams that are above 500. To your point, maybe later in the, not maybe, it will mean more later in the year. I'm not blown away by the fact that the Nets have struggled against some of the better teams. A lot of these are teams that have brought back essentially the same units, the same rosters, so you expect them to be effective. But we are far enough down the road here where when you look inside the record, you do see a very clear delineation between where the Nets are having success on their schedule and where they're not.
Yeah, and I've seen this number bandied about a little bit too about where their record is, and I think that that's sometimes cherry picked a little bit. I think we could probably drill on it a little deeper and to know where maybe some of the panic would come from this team is that when you actually reorganize their schedule in who like they've played that are actual other championship contenders, like teams. Because look, we all know in the NBA there's tiers, right? There's tiers of teams. Everyone's pretty aware of it. The regular season's fun to play out, but when we get to the end, there's really only X amount of teams that actually have a chance once you get through 7-game series and whatnot. The teams
Detroit
that they've
Pistons,
played,
things like them.
right? Yeah, the Rockets. If we get to the end, I got a funny thing about the Rockets, but so when you look at the teams that I would put in the championship class of teams, right, that they've played so far, teams that I think that we can mostly agree have realistic, and these odds are a little different for each team, but realistic odds of winning the championship. That's where actually you might actually start really worrying about the Nets, because when they've played those teams, they're 0-4 and they've got pretty much smoked. And so those teams are the Bucks. We all know how that game worked out the first game of the season. They got absolutely killed. Okay, it's the first game of the season. Later on, they play the Heat. The Heat really take it to them, and they lose. They lose. Yeah, they lose. End up losing by 13, but it really actually didn't even feel that close. Then I will also put the Warriors, obviously, in the class. Warriors have been the best basketball team in the NBA this season. They get completely destroyed by the Warriors at home by 18. And that was another one where it actually didn't even feel as close as 18. And then you get this game against the Suns. Obviously, they're in this class. They were in the championship last year. And yeah, they cut it to 7 at one point, but I don't know many Nets fans that would have thought that like they were really in this game. So this is a long way to say those are the 4 teams I think that they've played that have realistic championship hopes this season. And it has gone very, very poorly when they play those teams.
Is there any world where those handful of teams that you mentioned in these games early, that in the same way that we say when you have a blowout over a bad team, we're not going to put too much stock in it, but the game against Phoenix, sluggish start, ton of turnovers in the first quarter, get behind early, to your point, you make a run of it, you have to work incredibly hard to get back to that place, but how much of it can you chalk up to the idea of these are championship caliber teams that are bringing back familiar rosters versus a team that it feels like every game, even against bad teams, is still trying to figure something out in the first 5 to 7 minutes, the first quarter plus, where you go, yeah, against teams that know what they're doing, you don't get that wiggle room, right? You don't get that wiggle room against Phoenix because they're going to lay it on early. And no matter what, we always talk about what are the quality of the minutes, how much strain is on a player. When you're down 20 plus points, the 12 minutes it takes you to get it to single digits is a heck of a lot heavier than 12 minutes when you're playing back and forth basketball.
Yeah, and I agree with you that they came into that the game. Just to real quick go through these teams. Like when we talk about, we said in the title, when are the Nets contenders right now? I mean, they definitely are, but they have more to figure out than I think to some of these other teams, and I think that's what we're starting to see is that when they play the Suns, this Suns team has been the pillars of health over the last couple of years. This is a group that has played all their minutes together. They made it to the championship. Like that's going to be a super tough out, even on them coming in the second half of the back-to-back. That's going to be always a tough game. They won that's why they've won all these games in a row, right? Like they're just it's the same exact. They've been playing with the same exact team for a year plus now, right? So that's going to be a tough one. The Warriors have a style of play. They know exactly what they want to do. It's newsflash, it totally works, and so that's going to be, and you see this is why they're running, just steamrolling the league right now, because they have a style. They're not going to deviate from it. They're not screwing around with the rotations every night. They're not dealing with injuries. Like this stuff, it kind of builds up. You get the Heat team, who they caught at the wrong time when they were fully healthy, but that's a team of just total professionals, most of whom have played together. And then they add Kyle Lowry, who you can add to basically any team, right? And he can just plug and play. And then they caught the Milwaukee before they were just devastated by injuries. And that was a fully healthy Milwaukee team who knew exactly what they were doing. By the way, when you get to the playoffs, this is what you're going to be facing, right? Teams that have it all together. And so among these groups, I would say the Nets, when we look at this tier, this is where the Nets are probably a little behind the rest of the group. Is that their identity? I hate to use that because it's sometimes a catchphrase for I don't know what I'm talking about. But in this case, their identity is lagging behind what the other ones are, frankly, because their personnel just doesn't totally stack up right now.
Yeah, talent and expectations, they're in the top tier of the NBA contenders right now. But however many teams are there, the Nets are somewhere near the back of the pack currently, because they'd still be figuring things out if the playoffs started tomorrow. We want to get into a little bit more about this game with James Harden. what the state of his game is right now and the pressure that's probably on him inside of this offense, and then some rotational pieces as well. But first, Dougster.
Yeah, going to talk to you about Prize Picks here. It's the best, very best DFS prop game on the market right now. Look, if you've been over to other DFS sites, you know that you're trying to put salaries together. You're trying to, plan against a bunch of sharks. They're putting in thousands of lineups. You're up against other sort of factors than what Prize Picks gives you, which is just you against the house, right? They have more NBA props than any other DFS prop operator. They offer all the superstar players as well as bench players. So if you're like big fans like us, more guys than maybe most other people out there are going to know, you can really take advantage over on Prize Picks. Any prop you can think of, if it's the NBA, points, assists, rebounds, you do it for NFL, yardage, touchdowns, interceptions, throw, and they really drill down deep here on Prize Picks. And Prize Picks, all users that deposit on Prize Picks, you're going to get 100% instant deposit up to $100, but you have to use the promo code NBA. You pick 2 to 5 players, you overrun on their projections, you can win up to 10x on any entry, and it's just you versus the projected numbers. You can even mix up sports, like combine those 10 players in NBA and NFL together for a nice little sweat. Use the award-winning app on both the App Store and Google Play. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. Prize Picks is safe, offers fast withdrawals. Don't hesitate. Go to prizepicks.com, use the promo code NBA, or go to the App Store and just download the app today. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy.
And I know this sounds familiar because I've been telling you about it. You're scrambling around trying to watch the game live on your TV. You got the phone out that's letting you stream your favorite shows. You got highlights on an app or who knows whatery. You're begging your neighbor for those passwords so you can log into their accounts. Let's make it a little bit easier, friends. And you can do that by using Direct TV Stream. It allows you to get all your TV together in one place. You don't have to worry about any more of the different remotes, the different logins, the different passwords. Gets it all underneath one hub so you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in that great one location. The best part is, of course, too, that there's no annual contract. So you quit juggling and figuring out the confusion and begging Doug Norrie, please let me see it. He doesn't care. He doesn't want to help you. Get DirecTV Stream right now. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. Compatible devices required. Content varies by package. So the other thing then out of this game, the loss is James Harden. And this is the age-old NBA question of when is a triple-double not a good thing? And it just, this is, I think, what we affectionately call on the show Doug Nuggets. Doug Norrie saying, the box score can be misleading. At the end of this game, the Nets lose 113-107. You go inside of it and you see Harden. He had a bad shooting night, 4 of 15, but triple-double, right? A lot of assists, a lot of rebounds. You could look to a lot of different areas for what some of the concerns were. But you noticed as well, he almost went even beyond the triple-double.
Yeah, he almost had quadruple-double with turnovers. He had 7 turnovers in this game. This is why
never saw a stat that he didn't like. You know what I mean? You got to pad every stat you can find.
I think most people, like Russell Westbrook, sort of did away with the notion that triple doubles mean really winning basketball, and it's not his fault. Like, he just put up huge statistical numbers, but it became such a talking point. And then at the end of the year, I mean, you're usually going to be a pretty good team if you have one guy that's so good at everything. But I think at this point, the myth of the triple double has been pretty much eroded, and it's probably thanks to the conversation around Russ. But in this one, yeah, he has a triple double. One, sometimes that can just happen on volume. He played a ton of minutes, so he plays 40 minutes in this game. Right. So that's for a guy like Harden, that's gonna be pretty easy to get there. No one that watched this game would say he had a good game. This game was there was all kinds of problems for him. He couldn't beat certain switches that he's beaten in the past. Frankly, the Nets are the team that looked like they were on the back-to-back here. Is the Phoenix is on the back-to-back. The Nets are the ones that look like they were. He couldn't beat some advantageous matchups. This is going to be a pretty tough matchup for him no matter what, because this is a very good defensive team, very sound. They can switch a lot of the guys. Some of the burst wasn't there. He still sometimes refuses to shoot when he's wide open, which I don't understand. Like the catch and shoot stuff, it looked like he was kind of coming back. And then there's times where he's just open and he doesn't shoot. And it's almost like he needs a defender, or he needs to be stepping back to feel comfortable, or coming off the dribble because he did it for so long. I think there's times where this is still problematic. This is all to say the numbers sure look good if he was on your fantasy team for that night, aside from the turnovers, because he probably killed you in that category. But in general, you can't look at these stats and then watch the game and think, oh, this was a pretty good one from him. It was just not a good game. It was just not a good game. Like that, I don't really know another way to put it.
Yeah, and it's, after some of his post game comments where he's still trying to figure it out. You said about why is he not shooting when he's wide open? He said, paraphrasing, I'm still trying to figure out when I should shoot, when I should attack, when I should distribute, and what exactly my role is in this offense, and what the best version of me is inside of this offense. And we know that's a byproduct of losing a volume scorer like Kyrie Irving, but when you hear Harden say that now, like, we know everything is switching around and they've been dealing with some injuries too. Are you a little surprised that Harden is still framing it in the way of, I'm not entirely sure what my role needs to be here? In some ways, the second that Kyrie Irving is not playing, it almost feels like it should be pretty obvious what your role needs to be, right? You need to get a little more downhill attacking, a little more score oriented, and allow everyone else. And into this game, by the way, the one aspect that you do take away from it is the cuts from Bembry, right? Those backdoor cuts and getting him involved in that way. He's doing that well, but it just seems like the automatic shift should be score more first and worry about the other facets of the game second. And that doesn't mean that it would change the way the records look or the way some of these games against contenders look. But I do find it concerning 20 games in that Harden is still saying, I'm not sure what version of my game I should be bringing to this team.
Well, so I think the Kyrie thing is clearly a thing. Like, this is going to be the thing we always don't ever talk about during these when we talk about concerns about the Nets.
Should
like,
go
it's just
without
one of
saying.
these. It's just one of these things. Like, it's just we could just every title of the episode could be without Kyrie. It's worse, of course. That's just we just can't do 200 episodes saying it each time. So even though I just figured out a way to say it now, but I actually think that part of that confusion for him is because you're like, okay, well, he was on the team last year and it worked, right? And Kyrie didn't play a lot last year. Like, they didn't overlap all the time with their minutes because there was injuries the whole year. I actually think the confusion for him is that for the first time in his career, maybe not his career, but like in a long time, and he just doesn't have a dynamic big that he can like play with in terms of this 2-man game, the pick and roll and the pick and dive stuff that really works so well. And so I think actually you're seeing this byproduct of he can't create the same separation that he's been able to in the past. And that's probably a little confusing for him because he's not beating a bunch of, frankly, switches that he should be beating kind of consistently. Mm-hmm. And so that might be lending confusion to him because it's like, oh, I'm used to just beating this. Right. Like, I'm used to just dribbling behind this guy. I'm used to like them recovering.
I'm dribbling and then I'm past them and I'm scoring.
Well, there could be confusion there for him. Yeah. It's like these certain things are and by the way, like, man, professional sports are a game of just like micro inches, right? Like, if you lose a micro inch here or there, like, you are going, I don't know if micro inch is a term, but like, you know what I mean? A very small amount of space. Very, very, like, I'm holding my hand up on YouTube. Like, you'll see
you
like,
could see
smaller than what I'm holding, smaller than what I'm holding. But like, if you lose a little bit of that, then it's going to have this cascading effect. Now you double down with like, who has he always played really well with? He's always played with guys who are like pretty big, are pretty fast, can get to the rim, like, and can like, maybe live a little bit above the rim too, right? And then spread the floor around him. Well, the Nets kind of don't have that either. They're not playing like Blake. It wasn't working with Blake at all. Aldridge is definitely not that guy. And when you don't have a guy who can punish that pick and roll game around the rim and get to the rim really fast and at the right angles, like, this is why it kind of looks bad every time. Yeah. Like, he's just like, the things that he's really good at, he's probably lost a little step, whether it's through conditioning or whatever. And then you couple that with, they don't have a guy they don't have a guy right now. Like, Claxton maybe is that guy if he ever comes back, but they don't have this like athletic big that can get even like with even okay hands that can live a little bit above the rim so that like when he slips the screen and they both start rolling downhill, the lob, and it's finished. Like, we've barely seen any of that this season. And so I think the confusion about his role comes from, like, I think they know what they want to do. They just either don't have the personnel and he's just not at the same physical level right now to do it. And it's probably just turns into confusion when it might just be as simple as that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was going to at least just reference to Claxton. We'll get into him as we presume at some point gets back on the court. But this is that unique thing of Nicholas Claxton. Okay, well, he's a little clumsy on the offensive end, but he's the most athletic big they have. He's the guy that can catch the lob and throw it down. That's one facet for Harden's game. if even the switch from Blake Griffin now to LMA in the starting lineup is going to create different versions of what the offense looks like for specifically for James Harden, specifically for the point guard, right? It changes how he should be attacking or how he should be facilitating and the expectations around the players that are with him. So there's a huge conversation here that extends off of LaMarcus Aldridge, an area that we think the Nets have, as I said at the top, improved something and also continue to see other little wrinkles that need to get ironed out over the course of this roster. So I want to get that in a second here. But again, we got to dive in, of course, on, I don't know if you saved yourself, Doug. I did the good work. I went to Built Bar over the holiday season and saved myself the carbs.
Oh, and right now, if you're listening to this on Monday, you know that Monday is Cyber Monday, the best Monday of the year. Built.com is taking advantage of Cyber Monday. It's the best place for you to aim that mouse and click. You're going to get 20% off everything delicious and healthy. That's 20% off site-wide for Cyber Monday on Built.com. Bigger discounts on Built Boost, Broth, Built Swag. This is the full Built portfolio over here. It's all available for you right now on Cyber Monday. A brand new Built Bar flavor has just landed in time for Cyber Monday. Caramel Almond Delight delivers everything it promises. Caramelized chocolate almonds. Delightful. Double check. Be sure to get yours before they go on. 150 calories, 17 grams of protein. Maybe you're just craving a little white chocolate right now. For a limited time, you can get a special Built Bar Puffs flavor, white chocolate cheesecake, yummy protein treat filled with marshmallow center, covered in white chocolate. This is telling me all the things I want to hear right now. 140 calories, 17 grams of protein. Get to Built.com for these incredibly tasting new bars, 20% off everything for Cyber Monday. Head to Built.com. Got to use the promo code LOCKED20 before it's too late. It's LOCK20 for the 20% off. You're going to get it at Built.com.
And of course, the other thing that's delicious is knowing that betonline.ag is, of course, back this season covering all of your sports needs. You know that nothing goes better with a little bit of football, a little bit of leftover turkey, maybe some stuffing if that's your deal. And over on BetOnline, they got you covered this holiday season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all your sports action, not just this Thanksgiving, because that's over. Now look at the next holiday. It's going to be Christmas. They're still going to be your number one spot for all of your sports action. You head over to that new updated desktop or mobile website and sign up today to receive your 50% welcome bonus with promo code LOCKED ON. That's promo code LOCKED ON just for signing up. 50% welcome bonus. It's not just football. We know that. Pro, college game, NHL, boxing, UFC, even your favorite Vegas casino games. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. So this, I think, is the bigger conversation off of this game. We keep talking about sample sizes. I think, you go back to that Boston game, you feel like you solved a lot of things, right? You make some switches in the starting rotations, you look better. The team looks more effective. But you mentioned Claxton there. Aldridge gets moved into the starting lineup. He looks good, but the same thing from that Warriors game is still going to be an issue on the defensive end. And this is the position. I want to ask a bigger question around what the Nets need to do overall in their rotations, but this is going to remain a position where right now on this team, they have a collection of guys that can do some things to varying degrees of success, but no single player can do everything you need to do to an effective enough level where you can rely on them at both ends of the court.
Yeah, the Aldridge thing was a problem in this one. Phoenix is too smart. They're going to figure it out. Like, this is what happens in playoff series. Sometimes it takes a game or two, but they just will hunt down your worst defender and they will expose you for it. And this is what happened with Aldridge. Like, he's not their probably worst defender. I guess he probably is. Like, that plays consistent minutes. But the at least like from a big man standpoint, how many times did they switch onto him, right? The Nets decided they were going to have to try to switch everything. They hunted down Aldridge. It's like the drop coverage is not going to totally work. They can't really go to zone all that much, like against this Phoenix team. And so like I don't have the exact count of what it was, but it was a lot. And he kind of got played off the court. They kind of got played off the court again. Like, it was just, they never even bothered in the Warriors game, which if you take this as the proxy, it was that was probably correct, even though it's weird to not play a guy who's been so good. But this is just going to be the problem. Smart teams. And I'm not going to necessarily even put like Boston in this class. And Boston like doesn't have the guard play that Phoenix does that is going to figure this out. Cause it's a lot of Booker and it's a lot of Paul, who are basically just having whoever Aldridge is covering, that's who sets the screen. They're just going to figure it. Like these guys are smart. They see him on the court and they're going to hunt him out. And he can only play 28 minutes. And on the defensive end, it was just bad. And so when you get really dynamic guard play like this, like he's gonna struggle in these games. Like that's just not gonna solve itself. It's gonna be all season long with him, and it will definitely be a problem if it's still the thing in the playoffs because they just can't. It's not really tenable.
Well, and by the way, it's like you talk about, we know that Blake Griffin was super effective at the defensive end for stretches, but even inside of these games, they were switching and hunting down the switch onto Blake Griffin. So,
and they played a lot of drop coverage with him. Like they played more drop coverage with him, which he's a little more effective at. And so than Aldridge is. And so like there's a couple other little things that he can do or was able to do for at least a time on the defensive end that Aldridge still isn't able to do that much. And so
but,
it's not going to,
but you take the
not
positive.
every team is going to do
play.
it. Go ahead.
No, sorry. But you take the positive that LaMarcus Aldridge gives you on the offensive end, right? Because when you go inside this game, again, this is where the box score is lying to you in terms of the positive, negative impact, right? Aldridge ends up being a -11 in a game where he shot 8 of 12 from the field.
He scored 18 points. Yeah. 28 points. He had 28 minutes where he scored 18 points and it was -11. The reason is because on the defensive end, they got completely destroyed when by them essentially pointing at him and saying, his guy sets the screen and I'm going to go after you one-on-one. Like that was,
yeah.
I'm simplifying it because it's not exactly that 1-to-1, but it's pretty much that. Like, and anytime they play teams with good guards like this, it's just going to happen. Right? Like it's just gonna happen. Like I think most times the Nets will be able to contend with it because their firepower on the offensive end is so good. And so we're going to go through a whole season of them winning a lot of games. But when we talk about them being a contender, like this is another thing they're going to have to solve. Like he's going to be kind of unplayable in a lot of situations.
Is there a world then, because this is that pattern of okay, Blake Griffin shouldn't be starting, it's LaMarcus Aldridge. Okay, LaMarcus Aldridge can be starting, but 25 minutes or so, how are you going to level it out? I do keep coming back to this idea of, especially against these teams, the Warriors, the Suns, they both turn out to be in the the contending group for NBA titles, of looking at them and saying, well, as it is right now, obviously Day'Ron Sharp's the next man up, Doug. We get that. We don't have to get into him.
He did it. He got him in there. He got Day'Ron Sharp into a
someone started counter. I want a little counter in the top floor of the show. But and we know Nicholas Claxton, when he comes back, these things can impact what the Nets want to do. But I keep coming back to this position of, well, maybe it gets to the place where you start saying it needs to be. You need to go even smaller. You need to lean into Kevin Durant at the 5 because of the impact that can have. If you take the Phoenix Suns game, okay, Ayton, you're now responsible to try to match up. And even if you work the switch and you're going to put someone else on him, okay, but it's going to open up a new wrinkle. Like the big thing that I see in these games is that the Nets aren't forcing the adjustments of anyone. Everyone is coming out and saying, we're playing our game. Do you have the capacity to change or do something different? And I do start to wonder whether it's Harden struggling a little bit to find his game. You saw that Bembry had a little bit of a breakout offensive performance for himself here, but maybe it is about how do we get the most shooting and athleticism, and again, the sweet spot of on both ends of the floor around Harden and Kevin Durant, and see if that starts to create difficulties for other teams, because right now the guard play is too easy to sit there and say, get the switch, force the matchup, get your look. And there's no easy solve to that for the Nets. Now, the problem is, what are you going to give up now? If the next change for the Nets is anything where you move or try different wrinkles other than LaMarcus Aldridge, you are losing a lot of offensive output from him. And with Harden struggling right now, is that something you can afford to do? And this is where I think the Nets are they got Bruce Brown back in this game, still waiting for Joe Harris, right? We talk about this team is deep, quote unquote, until you see certain matchups and you realize they're not deep necessarily in key skill sets that you need.
Yeah, like I thought Bembry's minutes were really good. Like he's exactly what they kind of need. Just high impact defender, point of attack defender, super athletic. Like he's just kind of huge. I think he's clearly shown that he belongs here. He makes up for a lot of the other defensive deficiencies at times. His minutes really good. I think they probably could have even played James Johnson a little bit more in this one. Mm-hmm. Like he's a little bit more dynamic in terms of the defense. You're going to lose something on offense, but you just have to live with it at that point, because the what they weren't getting from Aldridge on defense was actually, in this case, way worse than what they were getting on offense. So like, I think they thought we were going to get, I mentioned this a lot, I think they thought they were going to get more quality minutes like this from Paul Millsap, and they're just not. And so like the James Johnson, James Johnson actually fit the scheme like pretty well with what they were trying to do in this one, because he was able to not get punished on switches. He can really guard up. Like, he's super strong. He's not going to get completely destroyed in like a 3-5 kind of matchup. And so maybe they just need to do that more and close with that a little bit more. Like, I'm not exactly sure. They need to get it would be really nice to get Claxton back for whatever sickness has been befallen him for the last what seems like forever. I think there's definitely ways, there's definitely paths forward, but when it comes to like the trade deadline, and if they have any chips that they can still throw in here, this is the one piece that they're going to have to kind of address, is like they're going to need a guy like this, like some switchable big, kind of anybody that isn't a total zero on offense. I'm not sure how many is going to exist out there, like in the marketplace, for them to want to be able to go and get, but it's becoming increasingly clear, like that's what they need. Right. So
should the Brooklyn Nets have been in on a non-guaranteed contract for DeMarcus Cousins, like the Milwaukee Bucks?
No, my God, it would be even worse.
No, I know.
Wait, did the Bucks sign him?
Who does these things. Yeah,
I think
they're a non-guaranteed. I don't know what the details of it are, but they're going to give him a look, give him a little taste. That wouldn't have been effective for
I'll say real quick, the difference between why the team like I didn't even realize this, by the way. God, I'm really never miss transactions like this. The reason why like the Bucks can take a flyer on that is because they have 2 total A+ defenders already that like are in Giannis and Drew Holiday.
Right.
And so you're already not going to be totally dead in a scheme like that, because they're 2, and the Middleton's a really good defender too. Like, their defense is already at such a higher level, like from a team perspective, than the Nets, with specifically like individual defenders. Like, they can take that risk because they're going to hide the deficiency way better than the Nets can. The Nets actually, they don't have either the guy. They don't have any 2 guys at the defensive caliber of those 2 guys. Like, so like they actually need to bring in someone like this. So I think they need to just kind of go the opposite way. No, God, that would have been terrible. I
was being tongue in cheek there, friends, for the listening audience.
No,
that was not.
I know you were. You were, but I was just like, you caught me in a real moment right there. I was not aware of that. I was not aware of that move.
And so the interesting thing will be, though, too, because remember, before we get out of here, and by the way, this upcoming week, yours truly is just gonna set sail for a week of fun and romance with my live-in lover, Courtney. So the Doug's just going to carry you home through a lot of the action this week, which will be awesome. So stay tuned for that. Got some crossovers lined up as well. But remember in the offseason when the Nets made all these moves, brought back Blake and signed Paul Millsap, and LaMarcus Aldridge returned, we said the big piece was about, well, now Bruce Brown, you can use him more in a guard role and get him back into that group. There's a world where we're cycling back around to, especially with the emergence of Bembry, where you go, well, let's get Bembry out there a little bit more. Let's get a little bit small with Bruce at the 5 and, and get back to some core things that worked for them last year. So there's still this weird blending process that seems to be going on. And the guy we have footnoted several times, and Paul Millsap, he's a big caveat here, as is Nicholas Claxton's health, of saying, these are guys we assumed there was going to be something out of them, and we've gotten absolutely nothing. You throw in Blake Griffin's decline here potentially, and the Nets had 4 bodies, and now they're effectively running out one guy who can't play more than 30 minutes. As I said, Doug's going to bring you in some good game action. Knicks, Monday night. Hello. So he'll be covering you on the post game there. We, of course, thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We're free on all those great platforms. Now, make the second listen, Locked On Bets, where your boy Q's got you covered for all your gambling needs. It's free and available on all those great platforms. Doug, Houston Rockets, hilarious tale.
Oh no, nothing. It was so minor. It was that I was watching the Rockets play the Hornets the other night, and I got like the Ackerman and Hollins, who do their play-by-play. They just do the absolute Lord's work, because they treated that game like they treated the win over the Charlotte like it was some combination of the U.S. team beating the Russian team in 1980 in the Olympics, and like,
do you
believe like a Disney
in miracles?
And a Disney fairy tale. Like, it was like they were so excited for this thing. It was awesome, because it was a nice reminder, because I was like, and that's off nights, or like that was not even totally an off night. Like, I'll go back and watch other games, and it's like a nice reminder, one, that the Nets have the best play-by-play and color people in the game. And it's like really not particularly close. Kustok and Ian Eagle and Brian Rucco was on the other night. Like, this group and Michael Grady's on there. Like, that group is really head and shoulders above what most of the NBA is throwing out there in terms of their local people. But two, the part where even though we talk about this contender thing as the problem, like there's some really pretty bad teams out there. And when you are a fan of those teams and are watching them, and like you can just hear it in the announcers' voices that they're just like they're trying, and they're not faking it. Like they were going for it. It was really it was a nice dichotomy, like listening to that and then listening to what the Nets are doing and just like knowing the difference and just kind of like on a night-to-night basis. So anyway, it was fun to watch, and I was sitting there. I was like almost doing color commentary and their color commentary to my wife, who could not have cared less. But like it's a nice reminder that
nothing better than a captivated audience that has zero interest in the conversation.
She's polite. She's polite as the day is long, but like there's not a single shred of her that cared. She'll never say I love her. Okay, we're gonna get out of here. Be thankful that we're Nets fans. We got a good team. Are they contenders? They got some problems, but we could be rooting for the Rockets, and so that's would be considerably worse. Go over it. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Nets YouTube. We're getting really close. We might even hit it by the time we post this episode. 500 subscribers. Next goal is 1,000. So make sure you're subscribed to the Locked On Nets YouTube channel. I'll put the link in the show notes.
Yeah, Doug is going to buy everyone, the first 500 subscribers on YouTube, your own NBA franchise. So you got that to look forward to as well. Talking about inches, micro or otherwise, nothing burns more calories than dancing in 5-inch heels. Try it. Ariana Grande.
Oh, one of the all-time great poets. We're back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.